Hey there, welcome to the Ryan Kingsline Show. My name's Ryan Kingsline, and in this podcast, we interview amazing artists, creatives, and creators to find out how they tick and how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right, so Jobye, right? That's how I say that, right?
Yeah, got it. First try.
Oh, good. All right. So tell me, I'm super glad to have you here. I was taking a look at your art station. Man, a beautiful, wonderful work. And that's, I think, one of the things I want to talk about today is really just this pursuit to get kind of beautiful environment work, especially with organics. Because, man, it's a ton of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. At this point, I've worked on like kind of more urban stuff, organic vegetation.
Yeah.
Now, my current job at Respawn, I'm doing a lot of hard surface stuff. So
yeah. So let's start out with where you are now, what you're doing now. Keeping notes.
Yeah. So right now I'm a senior environment artist at Respawn Entertainment.
Yeah.
So I'm working on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
Okay.
We're kind of pulling back the curtains on this week, so it's pretty exciting.
This is great time then.
Yeah. So it's it's a crazy week. It's exciting.
Are you gonna be posting that on your art station?
Yeah, eventually, for sure. But yeah, so I'm working on that. Doing a lot of hard surface work here. Yeah, just because like the last two projects, like I've just been like 100% focused on vegetation. So when I came onto this position here, I was like, yeah, I kind of want to like try something else and challenge myself. So yeah, since then they've kind of almost like tilted all the way the other way. I'm just doing mostly hard surface stuff at this point.
So what does that mean when you're doing hard surface? Because I think one of the things we do in the Bootcamp, I got to find where the camera is. I'm looking at this like black screen. There we go. One of the things that we do is we shepherd people either into organics or into hard surface, because we find that that's kind of a bit of a specialty. Is it fair to say that like people who do one generally tend to do one for a while?
I mean, it depends on the companies. This is the first time that I worked at a company at Respawn, and I mean, especially for this game where we actually have like specifically hard surface artists, which I'm not. I'm like an environment artist, so I work on more like levels and like big picture stuff. Yeah. But like our hard surface artists, they could be working on like weapons, spaceships, things like that. So they're like kind of like more like a 3D artist, but focused on hard surface. So yeah, but for me, I'm working on like environments. When I say hard surface, is that like it's just like working on stuff like on a spaceship or like things like that, so of that nature. But I'm working on like the full environment rather than like just like a singular prop or vehicle or whatnot.
Right. And then what does that mean in terms of what you do? So like, what's your work product? Is your work product 3D models, trim sheets, the whole deal, substance materials?
Yeah, it varies day to day. Depends on our point in production. Like right now, we're kind of just going towards a big milestone right now, and we're trying to get like all kind of like the rough geo in. So we're just trying to like eliminate anything that's gray and things like that. So just getting like temp textures on stuff. So whether it's like creating new stuff, new materials, or using existing ones and pulling all that together. But since I'm kind of like leading a level a bit, yeah, it's a lot of world building, kind of just like blocking stuff out to get ready for like the junior that's working with me, things like that. So it's like a lot of big picture stuff and just kind of setting the groundwork to have it all come together and work with different departments, lighting, skybox, all that.
Got it. Okay. So you're building mostly the geometry, blocking things out. At this stage, are you guys thinking about like paths and gameplay and any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest part of the job, I think, where I'm basically partnering with the level designer and like talk to him like every other day or her. Every day or every other day. And we're kind of like, just trying to collaborate and kind of find compromise between the space. Cause like design has their goals of what they want to meet. And then we have our goals and then we're trying to find meet in the middle. Yeah. So like I work pretty close with my designer to like kind of like define like, like good points where like this will be like a nice vista moment for art. And we can tell like this specific story and things like that. So yeah, we're absolutely thinking about like the golden path, just like where the player is going, what they're looking at.
Yeah. And is that's not something that I think they teach a lot in environment arts. It's one of the things I've
Yeah.
noticed is everybody just focuses on pretty picture.
And yeah, and I mean that's a lot of what you learn like kind of on the job. I want to
Got it.
say, yeah, because it is hard to like kind of replicate that in like game art school, right?
Yeah.
Unless you are teaching like level designers and then you have them do group projects with like all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a thing because like yeah, it's like in the name, right? We're game artists. Like we're not just artists. Like you have to make it pretty, yes, but it has to be functional, has to feel good for gameplay, has to play good. So
You know, I was dealing with this just today for my term 2 students, and if you're cool with it, I got a couple of them that I'd love your eyes on just to see their
oh,
work.
for sure.
So we'll do that at the end. But we were looking at this and we were trying to figure out like they've got a small scene and we just want to we want to present to people that, hey, we understand games and gameplay and we're thinking about this. So we were coming up and we were like, okay, so there's got to be some sort of beacon, something that's going to be attracting attention so that we know that, okay, we're supposed to do something here. And this isn't just a random scene, but it's somewhere where we've got to perform an action.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the golden path. Like, what do you think? What are the kind of elements that an environment artist can think about that helps present that they're thinking gameplay too?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different tools. More often than not, you kind of have to be like a bit heavy-handed and kind of like try to oversell it. Just because, yeah, when we start playtesting and you see what players are doing, like they they stray pretty easily. So like yeah, so like I mean, one big part is definitely lighting. Like that will definitely help to like kind of like literally like kind of highlight where you need to go.
Right.
If you play games like Uncharted and stuff like that, you notice that they really play up the contrast on any like kind of climb ledges they need to do. So like kind of the classic bird poop or just like kind of like that white kind of decal on there, things like that. So it's various things that you can play with. It's basically what you're looking for is just contrast in the image and like to really kind of lead the eye there. So any leading, whether there's texture, lighting, placement of props that leads you a certain way, things like that.
And how do we know if a prop is something that's interesting? Is it just contrast and this is much more detail, or you've got the lighting on this and we know to gravitate to, let's go check out that gun on the table kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you're putting the environment together, it's like it's not so much focused on like any individual prop. I'd say it's like you're kind of building the whole space and kind of looking at it all together. Right. And then after there might be a space there that you try to focus on, right? So it's like not necessarily a prop. Sometimes it can be like if an area is like themed around a certain object or things like that. But yeah, it varies.
Got it. All right. So in terms of the work product, a lot of what you're doing right now is just is the actual building of it. But for somebody who's kind of new to this whole conversation, because when we look at environment arts, like it's crazy, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's like that's not really just one job. You guys really probably need to divide this up at this point, I think.
And some companies do. Like for example, like ours is a bit less divided. We're all kind of flatly called environment artists, but like within that we have like some map leads. We have like kind of people that are more junior that are like under those map leads and helping them out. For example, at Ubisoft where I started, I actually came in as a modeler, which was great because that way you kind of start just working on props. So you're working under a level artist who's above you and they're owning your level and kind of putting it all together, taking your stuff, giving you blockouts and things like that. So typically that's the way I've seen most companies do it. It's like you come in as that, you're working on props, and then gradually you kind of like ramp up from like small props to like big props to sometimes you get like a little area and like you get Cetra stat, build it out. And then eventually you start going to levels and stuff like that. Like if the company does a good job to like kind of foster growth.
Right.
Like for example, my very first prop I worked under my buddy Adam Brommel at UB, and like he got my first day. He's like, "So what did I make?" And we were working on like this subway map, and he's like, "So we need some signs." And I was like, "So just a cube?" And he's like, "Yeah, pretty much." And I was like, "All right." It's like first job. I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it."
That's nice. So in terms of somebody looking to get into the industry, is there like a you mentioned modeling, but is there any other angle to take on that?
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely like modeling, so prop art. Like there's texture artists nowadays with like Substance and all that, and so those were like the two main things really. Typically, there's very rare cases that I see like kind of students coming out of school and then they come in as like owning levels and stuff like that. We have like one guy on our team, Steve Hong, who does that, and he's like a beast. But yeah, he's few and far between. Typically, like you start out doing the prop art, and then you kind of move up from there. Like for if you're looking for environment art specifically. But yeah, there's definitely a character art, all that as well.
Well, one of the things that I think confuses us too in this conversation is, do we need a full environment in our portfolio? Do we just need props? What makes us hireable?
Right. Well, I'd say the big thing is, like, ultimately when I'm interviewing candidates and like especially people coming out of school, like what I'm looking for is kind of potential, right? So like I'm not looking for you to be able to do everything right away. Like I need you to show, like, for example, that you can like do a good prop and like you're showing wireframes and like UVs and like potentially even LODs, or even like you're already starting to worry about collision. Like that kind of gives you an edge a bit. But then also like it is nice to see like maybe the beginnings of an environment, maybe not a fully fledged one. It could be like a little diorama. It could be like something like pretty focused. That just is starting to show that you have those chops and you're thinking about storytelling, you're thinking about padding and stuff like that.
Right.
So like ultimately, like showing potential, right? Like a lot of the juniors we've hired on our project now, like they had a mix. They had like a bunch of like super solid props, but then also they started building out these little mini environments, and it's like we're not expecting like a whole level or anything. But those mini environments, like, definitely, like, they might be rough around the edges, like, and things like that, and that's fine. But as long as we can, like, once we interview you and stuff, like, we see that you're open to feedback, that you're easy to work with, and have that potential to grow, right?
Yeah. What are the things that kind of signal to you that somebody's ready? And I'll tell you, I'll give you a preface it this way. In the bootcamp, one of the things that I kind of focus on is this. I've dealt with students for a long time, and I'm a lifelong student myself. And we always have this. A lot of us have this desire to kind of master something before we, apply for the job, or before we think we're qualified, right? And I've seen that's useful in some areas and not in others, because we over prepare. Like, hey, I'm going to master anatomy before I become a character artist. Good luck at that, right? That's just going to be welcome to the next 15.
That's a lifelong thing.
So I hope you're independently wealthy. So in terms of being an environment artist, I have a belief that there's just certain triggers that tell somebody you're a candidate or not a candidate. Like one of them is, do you have it finished and is it in a game engine? Because that's something that a lot of people.
Yeah, that's super important. Yeah.
So are there any other triggers that tell, like, it's just like, okay, this is definitely this guy doesn't have potential yet, maybe, but they're just still in the amateur phase?
Right. I mean, the game engine thing, that's huge. Like anything you show should be like in real time, like whether it's Marmoset, whether it's Unreal, Unity, whatever. That's a huge step and like kind of a huge leg up.
Do you care if it's Unreal or Marmoset?
Not specifically. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as it looks good, like, personally, like, I definitely feel like one is better than the other in terms of, like, if you're going to put together, like, say, a kind of like a mini environment, like the ease of tools and stuff like that in Unreal is a bit better, but like, Marmoset can be a bit finicky for that, building like full things. But there's no preference. As long as it's real time and like you're showing it within an engine, like, that's great. Because like if you come in with a portfolio and it's all just like offline, like mental array, V-Ray renders or whatever, it's like that doesn't really give me a good idea that you want to be working on a game even. So that'd be one. And then I think as a student as well, like you should be focusing on just trying to find just that edge over everyone, like, pretty much. So like I kind of touched on it earlier, but just showing the beginnings of like technical chops that you know about all that stuff. So like whether you're already thinking about LODs and like you're kind of showing that off that you did that for a prop, or you're just showing your wireframes and that they're clean, and then or that you have like a basic understanding of collision. Like already if you show that like with like your props and stuff like that, like that already gives you kind of like a good boost compared to most people. Like at the end of the day, say like I have a candidate who has like just like super nice portfolio, and this one has one as well. But then this one said like, oh, like here's my LEDs. He's like, here's my invert count, my wires, all that, and like that's already like a win in my book for that person.
Do you care about frame rate, or does that not matter just yet?
No, that wouldn't matter just yet. And like that's like something you really learn on the job. I feel like, yeah, because like once you're running on console and you're starting to think about like all those constraints and stuff, yeah, like that stuff is hard to like kind of grasp on like when you're in school still. And yeah, it's I think you shouldn't assume too much about that stuff. Like you really kind of get a reality check about all that like when you start the job really.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Because, for example, like, just lights and baking them and how that can affect problems with frame, and that's not necessarily, I mean, that's somebody's full-time job, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have like technical artists and programmers that look at that, but also eventually, once you are an environment artist, that is something you need to worry about. Like once you're owning levels and stuff like that, you need to like worry about memory. You need to be worried about performance. Like for me, like kind of my daily routine now, that I have the map up and running and stuff is like usually I get in and like every other day or whatnot, I'll kind of like boot up the console, like play through the map, see how it's running, look at memory, things like that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty important facet for sure, but that's something you learn as you go. We don't expect you to know that when you come in.
I didn't expect to get this technical because I want to look at some of your work too, but this is kind of cool to sit and chat about this. And one of the things that we started to integrate in the bootcamp is Shotgun.
Okay.
And do you guys use any particular project management, or have you any that you kind of prefer?
Yeah, I've mostly been in Jira. That's what like most companies I've been at have used. Yeah. Respawn has like pretty much migrated to that as well now. We were using like Bugzilla before, which was kind of not as fully featured, but yeah, now it's all Jira. So that's pretty much like the standard from like the past 3 companies I've been at. So
that's very text heavy, right? It's like very much project management.
It's not that text heavy. It's like pretty visual, and it's like pretty customizable. Like I think maybe baseline version of Jira is probably like that, but
that's
like,
probably what I saw.
Yeah, a lot of the project managers or producers they mod that and like script that up to actually be really user friendly for us.
Nice.
Yeah,
that works for artists.
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so I'd love to take a look at some of your work and talk through some of that. One of the things that we've been looking at lately a lot is just trees, and you're probably sick of hearing about and talking, right? But for today, the dilemma is, if I want to create a scene, it's got trees, it's got some foliage, like I know back in the day, 10 years ago, we used ZBrush, and that was very important. But a lot of the software now is like, it's not as relevant anymore. So what do you use for organics and foliage today?
Honestly, my workflow for like all the vegetation stuff I've been working on has mostly been like speed tree centric.
Yeah.
There's just like a lot of nice things in that program that kind of just like facilitate like the creation of it, and like just facilitates like iteration down the line just for like LEDs and things like that. But then what I do is that to like kind of avoid like that typical speed tree look, because like I feel like that's the rap that people kind of give speed tree sometimes, or even like World Machine, where
it's right where I was going too.
Yeah, so like there's like that speed tree look or World Machine look, but like sure, if you take something default, like barely tweak it and like just export it out, it'll look like that. But what I end up learning like at my time at Ubisoft and then on Shadow is that like you basically you can customize every single bit of your tree. You can customize like the bark texture. You can customize whether you use a custom trunk or not. You can use custom like canopy textures and all that. So basically, we're doing all those things, like what depending on your workflow. So that's how you kind of avoid like the typical speed tree look. Like at the end of the day, like sometimes I'll start a tree off with like a base of like kind of an existing speed tree, just in terms of like the node placement and things like that. But then every bit of that is like customized to like work to not look like that in the end.
Are you using their decorations and their systems for creating knots, or are you using other things to do that?
Not too much. It's mostly just like kind of stick to like more of the basic stuff, like just like the spine and like the branches and all that. Sometimes like the knots and stuff, they can kind of give it away a bit that it's like a easy speed tree.
There we go.
The like for example at Ubisoft, what we ended up doing was all our trunks were actually custom modeled. So like we just custom model like a straight trunk in 3ds Max.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you bring into SpeedTree, and then you actually kind of like just displace with the curves to get the shape that you want.
Okay.
So that way, like any knots and things like that are actually like hand modeled and like placed in there. So you can hand model it, or like even like with photogrammetry workflows, you can just scan it and like have like a tile go up and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of texturing, are you using just like tileable textures? Are you pulling stuff from Substance? How are you pulling these together?
Yeah, my typical workflow for the last 2 games was on Far Cry I didn't really do texturing. We had a texture artist who was doing that, and she was doing a great job. But on Shadow, I was doing all the texturing myself. But yeah, I had kind of like just developed a little workflow for myself of just finding like kind of just photo sourcing essentially to start.
Okay.
And
just
then
throwing photo textures first.
Yeah, so I start with that, and then after like I'd export out generate a height map from Endo really quick, and then tessellate a plane, displace that, bring that into ZBrush, and then after I'd focus on just getting like the large and medium shapes like to read really good and feel good, just to like be able to generate a clean normal map from that. And then I don't focus on any small details, things like that. Like I just get that from Endo at the end and layer that on. So that way it was nice. Endo, Quixel Suite.
Quixel, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that way the advantage of that was that so one, it was like really quick to just generate a bark texture like within like half a day you'd have like a pretty solid one. And then and the normal map would be like super clean, and as well as the height map. So that way, like if you end up using tessellation on your tree eventually, or even just like blending and things like that, it works really nice. So like the noise is really low on it.
Yeah. Have you found Substance Painter or Designer coming in and taking over that workflow, or is it still?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, with like Substance kind of gaining traction, like definitely. Personally, I didn't use that on Shadow just because like I was just starting to learn it, and like I got in like right in production, so like it was faster for me to like just stick to Photoshop and Quixel and all that and pump stuff out versus like having to ramp up for a few months to like learn Substance and get going on that. But like that same workflow can definitely be translated to Designer or Painter or whatnot, just because like you have your high poly, you can kind of bake over the low poly stuff and generate from Designer or Painter. Depends.
If I wanted to be an environment artist and I wanted to do the organics, I'm looking here in your ArtStation Shadow Award, the first one, vegetation asset shots.
Yeah.
Is this an acceptable thing for me to just be like, okay, look, I'm just going to create some trees. I don't even have a ground plane, just simple, but because all I'm trying to do is showcase X, Y, and Z. Like, is this something that I can put together and be like, this is my portfolio? If you saw this, you'd be like, damn, you got some skills, or X, Y, and Z you need to fix.
No, I mean, if you're like specifically looking to just do vegetation, like I think that's a good way to focus on it.
Yeah.
Definitely like if you end up doing like a mini environment, like where you have like you'd made the ground textures and like have like a bit of terrain and kind of propagate it on that, like that's like kind of like the one up from there.
Yeah.
Just as a base, like it works, like because like, the focus is on really on like what you'd be doing, because like typically like any vegetation artists I've worked with, like they weren't working on the terrain textures. You have like other texture artists that are doing that, like you're basically your Substance guys and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, this is like pretty focused, and it would work for a vegetation artist if that's what you're aiming for.
Yeah. Okay, great. So what are some of the common mistakes that people make trying to get into environment arts? Just, in terms of their portfolio, in terms of what they focus on?
I'd say it's sometimes when I look at some scenes, you can be like a bit too subtle on your details. Like say you're building like a little environment or whatnot. Sometimes they can be like a bit too clean. Like one thing early on that one of my art directors told me at UB was like, you should always try to just like oversell what you're trying to say, because typically like we have a tendency to just be like very shy about our details, and it's like it's easier to like just oversell, and then we're like, okay, that's too far, and we can kind of like reel it back in a bit, and then kind of find a happy medium. So that'd be one. A second would be like material definition. Like I think that's important to like kind of help push and like kind of know that you can like differentiate between different material surfaces and things like that. So kind of looking for that pop between materials. So that's the thing typically that like is kind of dull and like when I see student work, I'm just like asking them to push that and kind of really differentiate everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be the main thing. And then like, I mean, this one is like, it's trickier because it's like lighting and things like that. But like typically in the industry, we have lighting artists and stuff like that. So we don't expect the lighting to be like, oh, absolutely drop dead gorgeous and perfect. But it's like if you have that leg up of like pushing that, like you'll definitely stand out compared to others.
How do we push that? And along those lines, like, are there painters, or is there a particular look that you kind of gravitate to? Cool shadows, warm.
For lighting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the typical stuff. Like you're kind of looking for like complementary colors. A big thing I like looking at personally for like lighting stuff is definitely just cinematographers. So like any good cinematography. Like one of my favorite is like Roger Deakins. Like love all his work in like a lot of the movies, like Blade Runner and Country for Old Men and all that. Like very naturalistic lighting. So yeah, there's like and photography in general, but yeah, lots of ways you can like reference good lighting.
And that gives you a leg up.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like if you have that on your environment, for sure.
I'm looking at your Middle Earth Shadow of War vegetation level shot. And one of the problems that my students have is, just light in the shadows. Like the shadows just crush it.
Yeah, crush any normals or like specularity and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this and it's beautifully lit.
I guess it depends on what lighting format you guys use. Typically for baked lighting, it can kind of produce that, like in the shadows where it kind of like flatten things out a lot, and then you have to kind of like have like a lot of like helper lights to kind of help fix that.
Yeah.
So if you go all dynamic like that, which is what we had here, it was kind of like a mix of dynamic and bake stuff, but like it was mostly dynamic. So like that's why like when you look at the shadows, like things like pop more where like the specularity is reacting still, and you still see the normals and things like that. Yeah. So it kind of comes down to that in terms of the lighting scheme that you adopt.
Cool. What got you into games?
Yeah, I think it was like back in high school. I've always been kind of like a kind of big gamer growing up. And I think what kind of the game that kind of like pushed me over and kind of did it for me was Half-Life 2 at the time.
Okay.
Like I played that and I was just like kind of looking at all the art and like kind of just realizing, oh, like people are building this, like this is like something that like that'd be pretty interesting to do. And actually initially I was thinking of more going into programming just because like my schooling was kind of like very kind of science and math heavy.
Yeah.
But towards the end of high school, I kind of just realized that as good as I was at like math and science, I didn't really care for it really.
Yeah. Were the parents pushing you off on the programming?
Oh yeah, definitely that Asian that Asian upbringing. So, but at the end, I kind of pivoted at the end and realized like, oh, there's like the art side of it, and kind of almost did that on a whim, and it's like it's kind of worked out. Like if you saw like the we had to do like a drawing test to go into like the 3D school I went to. It was like stuff was horrible. I think my grades like helped save me more than anything else.
Yeah, fair. Oh, and 3D so much programming.
Yeah.
My wife is Indian, and already there's talk of MIT, so the Media Lab, and my daughter's like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I think there's a woman, Katie Bowman, just got some acknowledgement for
the black hole.
Yeah. So my wife's like MIT. She went to Boston, and so now she's researching like her parents and everything. It's quite hilarious.
Yeah. My dad is like Bengali, so like kind of Indian, and then my mom's like Filipino. So yeah, I kind of get it from both sides.
That's great. Do you think it helps having a kind of tech mind, or at least a foundation of that for this?
I think it definitely does. I personally, I'm kind of I lean a bit more that way. I do enjoy the art side, but I do enjoy the tech side of it. I'm just kind of like making things like run good and like get things in memory.
Yeah.
I think it definitely gives you a leg up in terms of like you have to be like kind of less reliant. It lets you be less reliant on like kind of programmers and tech artists to like kind of come tell you it's like, oh, fix this, and it's like
Right.
it lets you like kind of push things a bit better because like you know the visual side a bit better, so you kind of know the dials and knobs you can push, rather than to be like, okay, they'll just like cut all this stuff, and I was like, but if I do this and this, like I could still keep that stuff and make it still look good. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. That actually makes me think, because with games, I hear a lot. It's a hard job. You have to art test.
Mhm.
You're not, and there's layoffs and there's this and that. Like there was some recent rounds of layoffs. Most of it was
Yeah.
actually in PR, and like Blizzard laid off 1,000. It's mostly PR and community.
Yeah, there were definitely some devs in there. They kind of like they kind of downplayed they downplayed that, but
Yeah. So in terms of the health of this industry, and for somebody, maybe even somebody who's facing the decision of like, how the hell do I convince my parents to do this?
Mhm.
And, maybe they're looking at a programming option. Because if you're a programmer, you're pretty much guaranteed work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, programmers have it like pretty good overall.
It's just whether or not that's the work you want to do every
Yeah,
single day.
no, exactly. Like, yeah, if you're miserable and you're doing that, that's not great.
Right.
But I mean, in the end, like for art jobs, like I think the most secure jobs in a way are if you work your way up to kind of being kind of like a level owner and a world builder and things like that. Because at the end of the day, like it's those people that are putting it together in the engine, and like that's the people that they have on staff to kind of do that. So like with kind of like the prevalence of like outsourcing and things like that,
Right.
yeah, like props and things like that, like a lot of that will get outsourced. So in a way, if you kind of just focus on props exclusively in your portfolio, like that can kind of be like that tricky balance.
Right.
So like if in terms of long-term stability, personally, I think it's good to like kind of build up to like owning environments and building fully fledged environments rather than just like individual props.
That makes sense. So if we're talking about that pathway, let's say most people can come in and they can say, okay, I understand props, I understand game arts, there's a pathway. It's, high res, low res, get your bake done, get your materials established, and then in engine. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
We can learn that. We can do that. Now, if I want to evolve past that and I want to start owning my own environments, what are some of the skills that come into play then?
So it's definitely like just developing a good eye for detail and storytelling. I always say for like props, like that's like kind of the best way to practice in the beginning. Just because like something that you can kind of just like really focus on and spend a couple of days on, like you kind of just really think about how it's being used. So like where the wear is and things like that. So like there's certain parts of something that'll be worn. Like a door is like kind of the perfect example where like things around the handle will be like more worn. Like you'll have kind of like dirt kicked up from the bottom. Right. Like the door is almost like it's just so simple, but it's like a perfect kind of storytelling device for that stuff. But then you're basically taking that and then expanding the canvas in a way, right? Where you're taking that same eye for detail and like putting it to like a whole environment. So like you're almost less focused on like the details of the props, but then you're like thinking of like the arrangements of them and like how they're focused and how like a player would pat through that and like how you're going to lead the eye through that space. So definitely like an eye for detail and just like kind of overall composition and things like that. That's the big thing. And then also, of course, like this you'll gradually learn, but like just working with designers and like knowing how to go back and forth with them and like how to kind of get your ideas pushed through and kind of compromise with their designs. Because a lot of the times, like you'll get an LD block out, and if you didn't kind of work closely with them, like sometimes it can just be like, oh, like what's this, and you got to figure it out and make sense of it visually and not make it feel weird.
So let me ask you this: what the hell is a level designer?
So.
I say that tongue in cheek, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I want to, and this is one of the weird things in our industry, if I want to get a job as an accountant, all right, I go get an accounting degree.
Yeah,
makes sense. I want to go work in games. What the hell do? I go to an animation school to then go into an environment program and do what? And then there's game development and game programming, right? It's like.
Unfortunately for designers, there's not as many like schools and things like that. It's not as prevalent as programming or game art.
Yeah. So what is it? What is that job all about?
Yeah, so like I mean, at the end of the day, they do a lot of the stuff like under the hood that
Mhm.
basically makes the game feel good. So at first, like they're starting out and they're just like blocking out the level. So like they're kind of like defining the overall flow of the level, like all the kind of like major landmarks and things like that. And like there's a bit of a back and forth with art and stuff, but
Yep.
typically like that's what they're laying out. They're laying out like kind of like the rough skeleton of the level. And then past that, it kind of moves into like a lot of scripting, like enemy placement, things like that. So making sure a lot of the gameplay elements work. So like say if you have a game with like cover, for example, like they're making sure to tag stuff properly and like make sure like that all feels good for the player.
Right.
So yeah, they do a lot of the under the hood stuff. So like yeah, they're in a way like we always talk about them, but they're like kind of like yeah, they're under the hood of the art and whatnot. Like we have kind of center stage, but
Yeah.
yeah, they're responsible for like how good it feels in the end of the day.
Gameplay,
hmm
mechanics.
Yeah, taking like all their systems and like placing that in a level, making that all interact together, coming up with like kind of all the crazy sequences that you would go through.
Okay. And
So yeah.
they're kind of big picture. You're coming in as an environment artist. You're number
hmm
one, creating the assets that they position and move around.
Yeah.
And then when you own a level, you're a little higher up and you're actually doing some of that design and that level design as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, you're basically partnering with them, and then like you're just basically trying to both push your interests in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like for example, with my designer now, like we're really working closely together and like kind of working on making sure some storytelling moments come through, or even like world building moments for like just environmental stuff and like kind of big vistas and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys interact with script writers, directors? What's the rest of this whole picture look like?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I mean, it kind of comes and goes. Like at the beginning, you typically have like a kickoff for your map, and then that's like kind
Mm-hmm.
of everyone involved. Your art director, it could be the game director, narrative people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then you're just kind of running through like the major beats of the level, and
Yeah.
then kind of designer and the artist kind of go off and try to lay that all out together and kind of try to answer all those different questions and beats of the level.
Yeah.
Um, and then now we're kind of getting into the rhythm recently where we're kind of doing regular reviews with like all the departments, and then we're kind of just doing call outs and kind of looking at stuff together and kind of just really shoring everything up.
Got it. Thanks, man. This is all kind of behind the scenes stuff, that it's
hmm
just people don't hear about until they're actually on the job.
Yeah.
So, one of the dilemmas I've got with my term two students is how
Mhm.
much of this can we introduce? So we kind of talked about this a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. How much of this do we need to introduce? So you're going
hmm
to look at Lawrence's work here in a moment. And Lawrence, he's
Yeah.
built this really cool scene. It's a lot of stuff, but he's like, man, if I have to have gameplay, then I got to deal with the bake shadows. Super
hmm
big. I got to bake all that stuff, optimize it, make sure everything's working. And he's like, it's failing. And so he has to make a decision between being more technically minded versus being
hmm
more art minded. And
Right.
obviously, art's going to win because he wants the
Yeah.
environment artist job.
Yeah.
Um, so how much of this is necessary? Like, is it even worthwhile for us to have students pushing this gameplay or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not as much. Like, I don't think like we were saying earlier, you don't have to like focus as much of like about like performance and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. At the end of the day, like you're trying to sell yourself as an artist, and like you want it to look good.
Yeah.
Like because you are in a spot where like you don't have to like worry about like design and stuff like that yet, and like that'll come eventually once you're on the job.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah, as a student, like you should worry more about the visual fidelity and making sure it looks good before
Mm-hmm.
anything else.
Yeah.
But it was funny. I was talking about this with the junior I work with at work, Evan, and he was just saying how I was like, oh, was there like stuff that like you felt you weren't prepared for when you came on? And then he said like the biggest thing he felt like school didn't prepare him for was just like the whole teamwork aspect of kind of like
Mm-hmm.
working on a level with someone else and things like
Right.
that. So it's like that's one way I feel like schools can kind of help push that, where like you kind of have like maybe one or two group projects where people work together and kind of build up an environment together, and like that kind of gives a taster of like how it would be in the industry.
Yeah.
Because like typically you're not alone just building everything on your own. Like you have a team of people under you or with you as well.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. in terms of an environment like even this Middle Earth one, how many artists are working on that?
Oh yeah, we were quite a few. Yeah, we were. I can't count off the top of my head, but I want to see. Yeah, we were definitely like at least a dozen, like 15, 16 or so. It was a pretty big environment art team because we had like 5 open world levels to cover. So for me, I was just kind of focused on vegetation for the whole project, so that's what I was doing for all the levels.
Yeah.
But then, there was some people that were focused on these rocks over here, and like they were like kind of doing tons of photogrammetry stuff and going outside, taking scans, and building all that out in the level. Some people were focused on these structures. They divvied up a lot of stuff throughout the team. And then after there was like a few key level owners that kind of like helped put all that together. So yeah, it's productions are big. Yeah. So this, definitely, the last 2 jobs have definitely been in the smallest ones I've done. Like UB being one of the bigger ones.
Do you play games still?
Yeah. Less in the last 2 years or so since I got to Respawn. It's just been so busy. And like sometimes I just get home and I'm like, I kind of need to do something else rather than look at another screen. But no, I try to keep up with like any of the major releases. So like say last year I played like God of War like a week straight, just finished it. Red Dead, things like that. So I try to play like the big tentpole games to kind of just like keep tabs on what they're doing and like, and I think that's always a great way to like just see what others are doing, see what you can kind of take or improve on. Like for example, I remember when I was working on Shadow of War, Horizon was out at the time, and then my mind was kind of blown because I was like looking at their vegetation, which was like fantastic. And then I realized one time I was like, holy shit, all your vegetation is casting shadows. And I was like, it was probably one of the first games I've noticed that's done that. So like, say for example, on my stuff, like we have the bushes casting shadows, this ivy, the trees, but then they had it for like the grass, which is like typically for most games that's like too expensive, especially for console. So it's like stuff like that where you're just like, shit, like, can we try that? And like, I ended up trying it. It was like too expensive. I tried multiple methods to get it to work, but couldn't get it working for this game. But so I think it's important to like look at other stuff and kind of see how you can kind of push that needle or tweak stuff.
Yeah. Do you think it's important for somebody getting into this to either be a gamer or to have some familiarity with the craft or the end goal?
I mean, it definitely helps, but also like I also know like people that are super talented at their job and like that barely play any games anymore, or like just to begin with, they're very light on it. I think it's like as long as you at least like if you don't play them, like at least you're like watching them on Twitch or like just keeping up with videos and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it is still like just like it is important to look at other stuff, whether you play it or whether you watch it. Yeah.
That makes sense. So not essential, definitely a plus.
Yeah, pretty much.
So when you're working now on the hard surface stuff, are you doing mostly like geometry and just 3D modeling to build these things out? How much is substance in some of this new tech coming in? Not that it's that new, but
I'm actually for this project. Well, one thing I wanted to try was like kind of more a face weighted normal modeling approach. So I kind of like for most of the assets I've been working on lately is I'm kind of foregoing like having like a macro normal map for it and like kind of like a hard surface big for it. And I just kind of do like face weighted normal. So like put kind of like those bevels and then you kind of run that script on it. And you basically have like kind of like a nice high poly look, but with like very minimal geo. And then like you get a lot of like kind of the wear and tear and like the texture detail from like masking with like a layered material system. And that's what you're leveraging substance for. You're just like pumping out those masks to layer those materials.
You're using substance for the masks or substance for the materials?
For the masks. So like we already have like so we already have like say a library of materials and like and then after you're basically like masking between those materials. So the base materials are generated in Substance Designer by like one of our guys, Robert Walensky, who's like fantastic. And then after we're basically generating masks in Painter to like just mask everything and blend between like a painted metal or a painted just paint or metal and then rust or dirt, things like that.
Yeah, and that's cool. So about a year ago, I was telling all my students, look, guys, you're running out of the window. If you master substance designer, it's still like a huge need. And I was seeing people like one of the first people I interviewed, this guy James Raitosa, and James, really awesome artist, young, right?
Yeah.
And like just an amazing success story because he just bypassed college, went right to AAA games, and,
Oh wow.
and was just working.
Self-taught. Yeah.
Yeah, and he self-taught, and he interned at Allegorithmic, and he was he was in it, and all that stuff, and substance and surfacing obviously is a big part of that job for him.
Yeah.
Is that still the case today? Is substance still something where if you master it, it still works? Because I'm kind of hearing, most people have their surface dude now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everyone generally has like a base understanding of like designer, and they can kind of like work with stuff, especially like if you already have a substance guy and he's kind of like set up like a bunch of materials, like I feel like you need to be comfortable to go in that file and be able to like make variants if you need to. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is like there's only like usually a few people that do designer on teams. Like say on Shadow of War, it was like Josh Lynch and Albert Soto, and then here we have like our guy Robert Walensky who's doing that. So it's almost like I want to say like character art in a way where it's like fewer people doing it, but then like the rest of the team uses a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not as essential. Like it's not as much of an opportunity. Is that?
Yeah, it's harder to like. I'd say. Yeah, they're like the studios typically already have their substance guys or whatnot. Like maybe they'll add like 2 more, but it's like a relatively like small pool. You know?
Because they can crank out materials left, right, and center.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, they just like when I started, like there was already like a big bank, and like same thing for like on Shadow of War. We kind of had like a similar material approach with like layered materials. So yeah.
So if I wanted to, like Emily, and I think we'll pop over and start looking at work here in a moment. But if I wanted, Emily's got this facade she's building. Is it relevant for her to go and do substance designer and build the bricks and all of that stuff, or is the job really just about how she layers these things so she can go to substance source, grab a bunch of stuff, and then just make it look beautiful, gradients, top to bottom?
For students, I think it is pretty important to have those fundamentals of like knowing how to build like every piece of the environment. So I'd say that'd be still pretty important to do, regardless. Like at the job, like that might be very different, but yeah, it's important to have the fundamentals, and like if push comes to shove, we need like a bunch of new textures, and like we need to be able to rely on you to do that, right? So I think it is important to do that for sure. And like I think at the end of the day too is that like if you want to be an environment artist too, like you should be building those little environments with it, not just kind of just having render balls and that's all you have.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's the catch-22 I find. Some people, because you get into designer, it gets addictive because it's like programming.
Yeah, because you just crank stuff out so fast and variants, and you're like, it looks amazing with all this tessellation, but at the end of the day too, I want to see like how are you using that in an environment and how are you doing stuff with it. So yeah.
Yeah, and then you got 10 shader balls and no environment.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So before we go over and take a look at work, how do you keep yourself motivated and inspired to do this job? What do you do as just an artist?
I mean, honestly,
outside of get paid for it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's kind of bad, but like I haven't really done any personal work since I've gone in industry. I've just kind of been like relying on just pushing as much as I can at work and like kind of having like solid work coming out of that. So typically, like when I get home, I just try to like kind of properly relax and unwind from there.
Yeah, like what does that look like? Just Game of Thrones, or is there?
Yeah, on lazy nights, definitely like a lot of TV. It's I think reading, like, is as dumb as it is like a great way to like kind of get the creative juices flowing in terms of like just thinking about different spaces and like just like reading those descriptions and kind of letting your mind wander a bit.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. Been kind of getting back into that this year and just kind of trying to read a book a month. and then just kind of just going out and doing stuff like hang out with friends and like, or whether it's going on hikes and things like that, like just seeing nature and kind of relaxing helps a lot for sure.
Not just making it, like being indoors making it.
Yeah.
But going out.
Yeah, look at the stuff that you might be making.
Right. And Respawn's actually, that's in Orange County, am I right?
No, we're up in the valley in Chatsworth, north of LA.
North of LA, okay.
Yeah.
Is Constantine? I forget Constantine's last name, but I think he was
Leontiev.
Yes, that would have been him. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's up there with you.
Yep. He's our destruction artist. He's a badass. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's take a look at some work, if you don't mind. If I can get your eyes on it. Okay, I'm going to switch over so it's my screen because it's within our community in the back end.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Okay, so what I wanted to do is get in and look at some term 2. You can see my screen now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a term 2. So these are students that have been they've gone through the ringer, and their mentor right now is Alexis Boyer.
Oh yeah, I was listening to her talk with you just this weekend. Kind of get a feel for everything.
Yeah, and so let's look at Cody and their Emily. I think we can look at that. That's going to be, and then I missed Natalie and Lawrence. All right. So if we start here with Emily, there's 2 things. One, we're building this environment right now, and we're kind of picking a scene from Witcher. Here's the scene, and we're rebuilding that. So, what do you think about that as a process for us?
That's great. Like fan art or just looking at other games. Like, I think it's important to look at like games and then see like that you can match or exceed their quality. And honestly, like as students, you almost kind of have the leg up because you have more time to spend on a lot of this stuff versus us where we're like, we have just like so much to do and we're kind of like putting things together and things like that. And we do the best we can. So like you do have that leg up, like you can like really dial in the details and like really focus on all that. Yeah. So that's a great way, honestly, because like shows that you can work in like another art, like another game style. If you do different like kinds of games and things like that. So,
well, how do we keep it separate from the game itself, like so that we're not being judged against it, or maybe we are judged against it? And do we have to match it?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you say that it is like based on that game, I think it's kind of inevitable. So. In a way, I think you just kind of have to own it and like make sure that you do kind of do a kick-ass job at it, and
just don't suck. All right, then there's no problem. Right? Awesome. All right, let's take a look at her environment here. So I don't want to take up a ton of your time, and I have a particular way that I like to do these things. Usually, I like to just know like what's one thing or 2 things that tells you in this image that Emily is what we would consider a job candidate, and what's 1 or 2 things that tell you she's not a job candidate. And that's all we're trying to do. Like I'm not looking to make people masters, because I mean in environment arts you got lighting, you got texturing, you got too much. But I do need to telegraph to HR, to artists like yourself, that Emily can do the job.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
So what do you think something that telegraphs that she can do the job?
So here, looking at her stuff, she seems like she has like a beginning of a good eye for like kind of the basic set dressing for an environment. So just like things with like the bookshelf and like things on the desk and stuff like that. What like should I just focus on that right now, or just more? I can kind of swing between like what she need to improve, or
no, you can swing back and forth. It's hard for people to segment it, so yeah, you can switch back and forth. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, and then like the things that she can definitely kind of improve on detail wise is just kind of work with like a lot of the detailing in terms of like kind of what I was saying earlier in terms of like how things are used. So focus a lot of the wear on there. So like say like on that chair, like a person's like kind of like sliding that and like picking it up by the top, like so you'd see like more chipped edges there or kind of wear there. You have like dirt kicked up on the things over here. So like you can definitely push that kind of like just wear detail across all the props. And then even like throughout the floor and things like that. Like this chair will be kind of constantly sliding here. You'd kind of see scuff marks, like foot traffic kind of going here to the sofa and things like that. So that's definitely something she can push to kind of help push that to the next level. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good base to start.
Okay, good. I lost a connection there, but maybe we got from there. Emily, are you in with me, Emily? She may, yeah. Emily, does that help? Do you have any questions?
Should I be seeing the questions in the chat, or it's you just talking directly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I should. So, all right, Emily, I'm going to move, but let me know if that does or doesn't. Yeah, she says good. Okay, great. All right, Cody. Let's look at this. And Cody is building this.
Cool.
Same deal. Like just, something that's you think is triggering you and saying he can do it, and something that's triggering you and saying, no.
Yeah. I think there's the beginnings of like a kind of a really cool environment. Like it's kind of definitely selling like kind of an eerie feel, like a dank basement, like something eerie going on there. So like there's definitely those elements of like storytelling.
Right.
But yeah, the what's kind of really weird to me now is that like just the material quality is a bit weird, especially for the floor where I can't tell if like the floor is just like really wet or if it's actually like there's like a water plane surface or whatnot. So it's kind of hard, like if it's like flooded or something like that. So definitely pushing that, and then like just in terms of like the structural detail, kind of pushing the visual interest there, where like some of the walls are just very flat and bare. Like you can like have lots of breakup, like columns, things like that. And so within the walls themselves, but then also within the space, just to kind of help bounce all that stuff out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. Lawrence. And and there's two versions because we were debating this. Although, so this is what we would he'd done a week ago, a couple days ago, night scene, and then we switched it over to a day scene. And so this is what we've got right now.
Yeah, I definitely preferred the day scene between the two. Yeah, the Green Knight was feeling a bit weird lighting wise. But no, this is cool. I think like because the lighting is so dramatic, you could definitely like push that even more. Like you could kind of have like rays going on there, like volumetric fog to kind of really help sell the drama of the space. But yeah, in itself, like just like kind of the layout and kind of the idea of it seems like pretty cool. I think like things I can improve is just like kind of detail wise when I'm like kind of looking at stuff like this where like you just kind of like have hard edges. Like if this is a modular piece, you can kind of definitely push that, like have like a custom sculpt for it, or just kind of really have like good edge breakup, or whether if you use a trim even.
What do you mean by edge breakup?
So over here, so like say these columns over here, it's just kind of like a straight hard edge.
In the front, in the foreground?
Yeah. I mean, especially any detail in the foreground should definitely like pay a bit more attention to it and like really
got it.
Put some love.
Yeah.
And then just structurally, the space, like this floor feels like really flimsy. Like you'd expect some sort of support to kind of really ground that structure. So that's something you could like pay a bit more attention to, just to kind of just give it more weight.
Say that one more time. I'm not sure I fully understood that.
Oh, so just more structure to like the floor here to kind of better support it, because right now it just feels like kind of just like a thin, flat kind of surface. But like I'd kind of expect maybe like like little arches or like columns to like support that.
Yeah. You mean the ceiling is pretty weak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the floor itself, is.
Oh, sorry, yeah, because you're confusing this. Yeah, because this kind of looked the same as this. So I was seeing this as like the floor at the top floor.
Okay, got it.
But ceiling, the ceiling.
Okay, understand. All right, so got that. Okay, great. Now, what about color in the shadows? This is a big debate I got with students nowadays. Because I come from a traditional background, so it's always detail in the shadow and color in the shadow is always important. But how does that? It's a little harder to do, obviously. Yeah. In Unreal than just, hey, let me paint it blue.
Like, is the question like if that's like something that's cool or like that?
Yeah, how essential is that? What do you think about it? Because here, we're getting very warm shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it figure in? Is it a factor in terms of your aesthetic?
Yeah, I mean, I think you like ideally you always want the shadows to be kind of like a bit complementary to like
Uh-huh.
whatever is the main tone of the lighting.
Uh-huh.
So here it's like it's a bit like warmer lighting. It's like kind of yellowish red, and it's like so in the shadows, maybe you could have it like a complementary color, like more like blue or whatnot.
Mhm.
So just looking for that, or else sometimes like the image can kind of feel like just the same tone all over.
Right. Got
But
it.
yeah, definitely helps.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Lawrence? Shout them out real quick. I want to show you one more work. Matthew has been busting his hump on this. And so super close. Uh, been working on this for a bit. And
Mhm.
let me show the most recent one,
Cool.
Matthew. So I'll just cycle through. You tell me if you need me to stop.
Mhm.
Added a ton of lamps. Okay.
Cool. No, it's definitely nice. Um, yeah, definitely like some something that I'd kind of like potentially see like in a Blizzard game or whatnot, just because it's like very
Uh-huh.
stylized.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Um, yeah, I think just lighting wise, you can maybe like push the contrast a bit more. Like it can kind of feel like a little bit dull,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's a lot of colors going on as well. So like you might want to kind of try to like focus on like kind of just like two three main ones. Um, you're going to do like quick levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because this is one of the issues that we've had is trying to figure
Mhm.
out like how do we get the contrast to work and then still get detail in the shadows to some
Yeah. Yeah.
extent. And then he does have a lot of lights going on, you
Hmm.
know. Um, but yeah, so this is a bit of the pain. And when you're doing this, do you go in and take these things into Photoshop, or how do you kind of get in and start to adjust?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like because like it's mostly just kind of like stuff from production. Like
Hmm.
we do have like lighting artists that handle a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm say working with them and trying to like tweak a certain spot, yeah, like definitely try to kind of quickly look at stuff in Photoshop or even just like mock stuff up in game to show them.
And do you
But
find in games you kind of really have? I mean, you were saying this earlier. You have to sell it, so it's like this might be, you know, he's going for the subtlety of some realism.
hmm well, it's more stylized in this case, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Would you say this is a category? This is a candidate for push it.
yeah, I think just in terms of like contrast and like kind of focusing a lot more detail, like yeah, kind of just this quick tweaks that you've been doing already. It's like helps like really focus stuff on on the throne better.
Yeah.
Yeah, before it's kind of like you're not too sure where to look at, and yeah.
Oh, interesting. And that's the whole gameplay. Oh, you're right, because the
Mhm.
throne is actually the same value, and
Mhm.
actually the sides is where most of the light is.
Yeah, yeah. So you can kind of like really lead the eye a bit better. Like yeah, just by pulling that like helps a little bit. And like
Okay.
a good way of doing that too is like yeah, looking at it small like that, or just like blurring your eyes and see like what's the main details that you see.
Okay.
Um, and kind of really focusing on what you want them to look at.
All right. Joby, man, thank you so much for being in here, for taking the time. I
Yeah,
know
this is
you're
great.
busy, and for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, of course, anytime, man. Yeah, and if you guys have like any other questions or want some feedback, like feel free to email me or poke me on ArtStation, whatever. Always happy to help.
That's great. A lot of my students are always very cautious about that,
Yeah,
which is obviously good because you can overdo it.
yeah.
But I always tell them, we all, almost everybody in this industry kind of had to learn on their own to some extent.
hmm
So we're
Yeah,
always usually giving.
yeah, and I mean, I wish I had like a podcast like these and stuff when I was kind of coming up in school back in like
Mm,
2007, 2010. So it's
yeah.
nice to be able to give back. Yeah, I'm definitely sometimes I'm like can be super busy and like it can take a while to get back, but try my best.
Yeah, me too. I disappear for weeks at a time from
Yeah.
email.
Yep.
That's a little hard. All right. Any last words for people that are looking to get in? Any wisdom that you wish you would had given or been given?
Um, Yeah, I guess it's maybe two main things. I had like a little list of stuff I want to talk about, but like I think one interview question I always like asking, like whether it's a senior person or a junior, but especially juniors, and especially because they have like a lot of personal projects.
Yeah.
Is that I kind of take one of their scenes, like typically some of their oldest one, and I just say like, so given the chance to like go back on this, what would you change? What would you improve?
Right.
And so that way, like that really shows me like how self-critical you can be of your work, and like how is it you can be like taking feedback from us and giving feedback about your own stuff. So I think that's like really important because like we want kind of people to be able to like look at their stuff and know what they can improve without us necessarily telling them, but like we will be helping them along. But you need to have that base of self-criticism for your own stuff. For me, like that's almost like it's almost like an instant no for me if like I ask someone that and then they're just like, oh, like I'd maybe change this little thing, but everything else seems pretty fine. But it's like just like I've had interviews like that and I'm just like, all right. And but there's clearly a lot of stuff you could have improved and like run us through of what you would have done. But so that's definitely one thing to pay attention to, like practice with classmates, taking feedback about your scene, giving feedback. And I guess the other thing too is just like kind of always do more for your stuff, like kind of always go the extra mile. Like whether it's like you finish school and then like you're applying for jobs and stuff like that, like keep working on polishing your school projects after you're done, doing personal projects on top of that, like trying to find like indie projects or mod projects to help out on to kind of get that leg up of experience despite not being in the industry yet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Leave on.
That's great. Do you look for like a little bit of an addiction to making things better? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, constant self-improvement. Like, if we kind of see that kind of growth potential, and like that's what we're looking for at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
That you just kind of always want to better yourself and do better in what you're doing.
Yeah. So. That's great. Latest software, does that figure into it, or is that less important?
I mean, that definitely helps. But for me, it's not that big of a deal. It's like it's good to like kind of keep up with what's already there. Like, say for example, there's like Houdini kind of coming up like really fast now, but at the same time, it's not so widely adopted in studios either. So it's not like, oh, okay, we're not going to like hire a junior to do Houdini stuff. Like, we'll try to find like a seasoned expert for that. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, my friend. Really great talking to you.
Yeah, it was great talking. Catch you next time.
Yep. All right. Take care, guys.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com, where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch. But at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right, thank you so much again for being here. Take care, have an amazing day.